تمام مومنین سے معروضہ ہے کہ اندر تشریف لا لیجیے. مجلس کا آغاز ہونے جا رہا ہے حدیث قصہ سے. اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. ان اللہ وملائکتہ یصلون علی النبی یا ایھا الذین آمنوا یصلوا علیہ وسلموا تسلیما. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. ان فاطمة الزہراء علیہ السلام بنت رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ انہا قالت دخل علی ابی رسول اللہ فی بعض الایام فقال السلام علیک یا فاطمة فقلت علیک السلام. قال انی اجد فی بدنی ضعفا فقلت لا اعوذک باللہ یا ابتاه من الضعف. فقال یا فاطمة ایتینی بالکساء الیمانی فغطینی به فأتیته بالکساء الیمانی فغطیته به وسرت انظر الیہ وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. اللهم صل على. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن عليه السلام قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أمه فقلت وعليك السلام يا قرة عيني وسمرات فؤادي. فقال يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت نعم إن جدك تحت الكسوة. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكسوة وقال السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكسوة. فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوزي قد عزمت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكسوة. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أمه فقلت وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وسمرات فؤادي. فقال لي يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكسوة. فدنا الحسين نحو الكسوة وقال السلام عليك يا جدا والسلام عليك يا من اختار الله واعتزنوا لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكسوة. فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي قد عزمت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكسوة. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن أمي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت نعم ها هو ما ولديك تحت الكسوة. فأقبل علي نحو الكسوة وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكسوة. فقال له وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسي وخليفتي وصاحب لواء قد عزمت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء ثم أطحت نحو الكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بزتي قد عزمت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أقاز أبي رسول الله بطرف الكساء وأومأ بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال الله إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وقاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنوني ما يحزنوهم. أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم، فاجعل سلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. فقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان السماوات إني ما خلقت السماء مبنيا والأرض مدية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مزية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكسوة. فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا ربي ومن تحت الكسوة؟ فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبالها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل يا ربي أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض ليكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله نعم قد عزمت لك. فأهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويقصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت السماء مبنية ولا أرض مدية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مزية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فهل تأذنوا لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله فإنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. فقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيتنا ومحبنا إلا من نزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي عليه السلام إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيتنا ومحبنا وفيهم معموم إلا وفرج الله همه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجات إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي عليه السلام إذا والله فزن وسوئدن وكذلك شيتون فازوا وسوئدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. واسطہ محمد وعلی محمد علیہ السلام کا تلاوت حدیث قصہ کو اپنی بارگاہ میں درجہ قبولیت عطا فرما، اور اس کے طفیل میں تمام حاضرین مجلس اور بانیان مجلس کی دلی مقاصد کو فردن فردن پورا فرما. کوئی غم نہ ہو سوائے غم حسین کے. آپ مومنین سے گزارش ہے کہ ایک مرتبہ سورہ حمد اور 3 مرتبہ سورہ اخلاص کی تلاوت فرما کر آج کے بانیان کے تمام مرحومین کے لیے اور اپنے مرحومین کو شامل کرتے ہوئے ملت کے شہداء اور وہ جن کا کوئی پڑھنے والا نہیں ہے جملہ تمام مرحوم مومنات و مومنین کے لیے ایصال فرما دیجیے. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. اللہم صلی علی محمد.
مومن اکرام السلام علیکم. میں فراز بھائی کا منتظر تھا کہ شاید وہ آگے آئیں گے، لیکن شاید کچھ دیر ہو گئی. آج کا پروگرام آپ کو پتہ ہے، جیسے آج 10ویں امام کی شہادت کا دن ہے، اور آج کی مجلس ہے وہ 2 سلام اور اس کے بعد مولانا پڑھیں گے. تو میں درخواست کروں گا برادر فضل مہدی سے کہ آئیں اور سلام پیش کریں. پر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. ایک سلوات کا سارا. سلمہ سے مدینے میں یہ سوگرا نے کہا، جان کس حال میں ہے میرے مسافر بابا. اے مسافر بابا میرے بابا، لمحہ لمحہ میرا دشوار ہوا جاتا ہے، کہ اب تو جینا میرا دشوار ہوا جاتا ہے. خون کی بو سے مہکتی ہے مدینے کی فضا، جان کس حال میں ہے میرے مسافر بابا. خون کی بو سے مہکتی ہے مدینے کی فضا، جان کس حال میں ہے میرے مسافر بابا. آج سورج کی کمازت میں ہے شرکت کیسی،
کہ آسماں ٹوٹ کے گر جائے تو حیرت کیسی، اور زمیں خون اگل دے تو تعجب کیسا، جان کس حال میں ہے میرے مسافر بابا۔ سلمہ سے مدینے میں یہ صغرا نے کہا، جان کس حال میں ہے میرے مسافر بابا۔ صبح سے آج میرا دل بڑا گھبراتا ہے، جام پانی کا اٹھاتی ہوں تو گر جاتا ہے، ایسا لگتا ہے کہ صحرا میں کوئی ہے پیاسا، جان کس حال میں ہے میرے مسافر بابا۔ بند آنکھیں بھی مجھے خون ہی دکھلاتی ہے، میں خواب میں لاشیں پہ لاشیں ہی نظر آتی ہے، دل کو محسوس یہ ہوتا ہے قیامت ہے بپا، جان کس حال میں ہے میرے مسافر بابا۔ سلمہ سے مدینے میں یہ صغرا نے کہا، جان کس حال میں ہے میرے مسافر بابا۔ صلوات پڑھ دو۔ سلمہ سے مدینے میں یہ صغرا نے کہا، ہائے میرا اصغر میرا بھیا، دھڑکن کہتی ہے آفت میں گھرا ہے کوئی، اپنے گہوارے سے دانستہ گرا ہے کوئی، ایسا لگتا ہے کوئی دیتا ہے حل من کی صدا، جان کس حال میں ہے میرے مسافر بابا۔ اب گرفتارے بلا مجھ کو یہ گھر لگتا ہے، کہ وسوسے ذہن میں آتے ہیں تو ڈر لگتا ہے، یا الہی نہ کوئی سچ ہو میرا اندیسا، جان کس حال میں ہے میرے مسافر بابا۔ ام سلمہ سے مدینے میں یہ سوگران نے کہا. صلوات اللہ.
جزاک اللہ. یہ برادر فضل مہدی پڑھ رہے تھے. میں درخواست کروں گا جناب کامران مہدی سے تشریف لائیے اور سلام پیش کیجیے. بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
ایک مرتبہ اور بل کے باوجود صلوات پڑھتے محمد وآل. قبلہ اجازت چاہوں گا سلام کے چند اشعار پیش کرتا ہوں. آسمان لرزا زمین کانپی سمندر روئے. آسمان لرزا زمین کانپی سمندر روئے. قبر میں ماں کے لیے جب قبر میں ماں کے لیے جب علی اصغر روئے. آسمان لرزا زمین کانپی سمندر روئے. تنہا روتی تھی 72 کو علی کی بیٹی. تنہا روتی تھی 72 کو علی کی بیٹی. اور بیردہ جب ہوئی زینب تو بیردہ جب ہوئی زینب تو 72 روئے. آسمان لرزا زمین کانپی سمندر روئے. نزوہ میں یاد جو بیمارے مدینہ آئی. نزوہ میں یاد جو بیمارے مدینہ آئی. ہچکیاں بندھ گئیں اس طرح ہچکیاں بندھ گئی اس طرح سے اکبر روئے. آسمان لرزا زمین کانپی. اب وقت رخصت جو حسین آئے در خیمہ پر. وقت رخصت جو حسین آئے در خیمہ پر. ارے شاہ زینب سے بہت دیر
شاہ زینب سے بہت دیر لپٹ کر روئے، آسمان لرزا زمین کانپی، سمندر روئے، شمر کا خوف ہے گردن میں، رسن بھی ہے بندھی، شمر کا خوف ہے گردن میں، رسن بھی ہے بندھی، اپنے بابا کو سکینہ، اپنے بابا کو سکینہ کہاں جا کر روئے، اور سن کے اے میر تکلم تیرا مجلس میں سلام، سن کے اے میر تکلم تیرا مجلس میں سلام، فاطمہ روئی علی روئے، فاطمہ روئی علی روئے، پیمبر روئے، آسمان لرزا زمین کانپی، سمندر روئے، بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات۔
یہ جناب کامران مہدی صاحب تھے، ایک بلند ترین صلوات ان کی توفیقات کے لیے بلند پڑھ دیجئے۔ آپ تمام لوگوں کو معلوم ہے کہ آج کی مجلس انگلش میں ہے۔ مولانا علی حسن Abidi came all the way from New York to recite this Majlis today. We are lucky to listen to him first time. And there is an announcement to make. Next Sunday, there is a Majlis for the fourth Imam, fifth Imam on Sunday at the same time like today, exactly at 6:45 will start. So we're asking everyone to please join that. And I'm going to continue from Urdu to English. کہ تو نے سمجھا ہے صرف خیبر ہی اڑاتا ہے علی، تو نے سمجھا ہے صرف خیبر ہی اڑاتا ہے علی، یا فقط پردہ معراج پہ جاتا ہے علی، میرے کرار کی جرت کا یہ انداز بھی دیکھ، میرے کرار کی جرت کا یہ انداز بھی دیکھ، اپنے سوئے ہوئے قاتل کو جگاتا ہے علی۔ So before I'm going to ask Maulana, I would like to thank you. And 2 lines in English. There's a narration that we heard about the Karbala. On the day of Ashura, on the very first morning, before even the war started, 4,000 archers aimed towards the tent of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. 4,000 arrows were thrown on the tents. There were only 12 to 15 tents, and there were 4 to 5 people in each tent. Everybody was injured early in the morning. That's how the Karbala started on Ashura. Every child was wounded, every lady was wounded, every man was wounded before even the war started. On these words, I'm going to ask or request Maulana to please join us and recite the Majlis. For Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad Salawat. Request everybody to please come forward and just have the Majlis Please, everybody just move forward.
صلوات صل على محمد الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف أنبياء المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم مصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المنتجبين. صلى الله عليك يا محمد بن علي الجواد، يا قريب يا مظلوم. قال الله في كتاب المحكم الكريم: قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى. Say, I do not ask you anything, O Prophet, except for the love of my dear relatives. I begin in the name of Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful. May peace and blessings be upon his final messenger and the mercy to mankind, Muhammad al-Mustafa. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And his inheritor and successor, the Wali of Allah, Ali ibn Abu Talib, alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And the blessed progeny of the Ahl Bayt and the master of our time, Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman. Ajalla ta'ala Faraja Sharif. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Dear brothers, honored community members, sisters, I send my salams to you and to the malaika amongst us. Assalamu alaikum wa jami'an rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The reason I mentioned the malaika amongst us is because we have a tradition narrated from Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, in which he says that peace and blessings be upon the believer who gathers, because no two believers gather that amongst them there is a third, who is an angel from the skies, who is seeking the forgiveness for these two. And the best of you who are gathered to revive our affairs and invite those to remember our affairs and our teachings. For that area and that gathering is filled with the malaika. So at first and foremost, I send my salam to the community and the malaika amongst us, and to the Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, who we have invited, of course, to listen to the dhikr and the remembrance of his grandfather, Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam. Ma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Today we're gathered to commemorate the martyrdom of the Imam who took the mantle of Imamat at the youngest age, only at the age of 8. At the age of 8, his father, Imam Ali al-Rida alayhi salam, was martyred and poisoned by Al-Ma'mun al-Abbasi. So only at the age of 8, he took the Imamat. And at his birth, Imam Ali al-Rida alayhi salam said a very beautiful statement. He says that no child like him has ever been born, and we have not been blessed with any child like him before. And it's a very powerful statement, because we had many Imams, we had many prophets before us. Why was this statement said? That no child like him has ever been born, and we have not been blessed with any child like him. To understand this, we must understand what was happening at that time. Imam Ali Rida alayhi salam was in his 40s without a child. People started doubting the Shia. They says that, "Oh Imam, where's your child?" He says, "Trust in Allah and trust in me. Allah has promised a child will come and an Imam will come. Allah has promised that there will be 12 from Ali Muhammad. Trust in Allah." People started losing their faith. People started having their own interpretations. The Imam says, "Believe in me, a child will come." Allah was testing the people of their time. In his 40s, he had Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam. And when he was 8 years old, in the year 195, he was born, and 220, he was martyred at the age of 25, 24, 25 only. But at the age of 8, he became the Imam. So people at the time started doubting him. They said, how can a young child be the Imam of the Ahlul Bayt? And this is why the Imam said, no child like him. One of the reasons. Blessed like him, because he showed that it is not the people who choose the Imam, but it is Allah who chooses the Imam. And Allah gives the Imamah to who He chooses. For it has been done before since Saqifa that people have chosen their leaders. Allah wanted to show the people that, look, there's a difference between the ones that you choose and the ones that we choose. A very big difference. While he was 8 years old, he became the Imam. Al-Ma'mun, he wanted to... So Ma'mun at the time was the Abbasid Khalifa. So I want to explain this part first. Ma'mun himself, he pretended to love the Ahlul Bayt because he knew in his heart that they had the knowledge and the power given to them by Allah. But yet, his nafs did not allow him to give allegiance to them. But he knew their status. This is why he declared Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, his heir apparent. And then he saw his son, Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam, and he says, I want to marry my daughter to Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam. And his daughter was older than him. And at that time, you have to understand, the Abbasid caliphs, they did not want the power to go to Ali Muhammad, even though they were also from Ali Muhammad, but they came from his uncle al-Abbas. But they did not want the power to go to the descendants of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. They did not want that to happen. But Ma'mun knew that the knowledge that's bestowed upon this child, and from him will come Al-Qa'im, and this will be the best decision for him to align his lineage with the lineage of Ali Muhammad. Even though he did not believe that they were right to take the Khalifa from him, because he wanted to keep the Khalifa for himself. But now he told the Abbasids, I'm going to marry my daughter to the young Imam, Imam al-Jawad. The Abbasids were having a fit. They said, how can we allow our daughter to marry Imam al-Jawad? They will take all the power away from us. And he's just a young child, only 8 years old. And Ma'mun, he knew what this young 8-year-old child was about and the knowledge that he had. So he says, okay, you know what? I'll show you the knowledge he has and why I'm making the decisions that I'm making. And while he's doing this, keep in mind, Ma'mun is not a good person. Ma'mun is the one who martyred his father, Imam Ali Rida alayhi salam. So he gathered the people in the court. He gathered everyone. He says that let's have a public debate. I will call Yahya bin Ahkam, who is the legal jurist of the time, the top jurist of the time. Call him and debate with Imam al-Jawad. And many of us know this story already. What happened was Yahya came. Yahya felt humiliated debating a young child. But when Yahya asked the question to the young child, al-Jawad, he didn't realize he's facing the one who Allah had given the knowledge. He embarrassed Yahya. He says, the question that you're asking me requires this many prerequisites. And he listed them all out. In front of the court of the Abbasids, Yahya, the top jurist, was embarrassed by the son of Ali Muhammad. And this showed once again that knowledge does not come from the people who we choose or from the books that people read. At the end, true knowledge, the knowledge that the Imam have, it cannot be taken and earned by anyone else. At 8 years old, he did this. And later on, once again, there's another narration that tells us when Al-Mu'tasim, who was the inheritor of Ma'mun, he also called Al-Jawad, Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, to the court, and he says that someone had come. And this is very important to understand, that someone who's just a teenager at this time is going to, and for the ummah to understand this, Al-Mu'tasim had moved the capital to Baghdad. Baghdad had become the center of Islamic knowledge in the world. The center of Islamic knowledge. They had the top jurists, the top legal jurists, Islamic jurists of their time there. A case was brought to them. Someone who had stolen. He had stolen, they wanted to know what the punishment is. And as we know, they say that the punishment is to cut off the whole hand. So he wanted to get to the bottom of this. Al-Mu'tasim gathered all the jurists. He says that, what is the punishment for this person? Their first top legal jurist of that time says there's a verse in the Quran in which it says, wipe from the hand and the face, right? So he's talking about tayammum. So he says, okay, cut them from the wrist, cut the whole hand off. The first legal jurist at the time, the top legal jurist. The second legal jurist says, no, there's a verse in the Quran in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 6, he says that, no, don't cut from the wrist. There's a verse that says that wash the hands up to the elbow, so cut from the elbow. Now, do you understand what's happening here? These legal jurists are doing their own interpretation of the Quran, trying to figure out what the legal ruling is. Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, who's a young teenager at that time, he's sitting there. Al-Mu'tasim says, Al-Jawad, what is the ruling? And I put you on oath to tell us the ruling. He says that both of these are wrong. The ruling is this, and it's very simple. There's a hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, that we have 7 places for sujood. Our feet, our toes, our knees, our palms, and our forehead. And there's a verse in the Quran in which Allah says that the places of prostration are for Allah and owned by Allah. The meaning of that verse. So how can you cut off the palm? How can you cut off the palm if it is a place of prostration? And it is owned by, and these places of prostration are for Allah. So how do we have the right to cut off the palm? The Islamic ruling in this sense would be that you cut off the fingertips only. That means if this person repents later on, he can still do sajda. And he can use his hands for good if he repents later on. So now do you understand, these top legal jurists were doing their own interpretation of the Holy Quran, while the true knowledge, as we know, what Rasulullah said, that it rests with Ahlul Bayt and the Quran. I leave behind you what? The Quran and Ahlul Bayt. Not that you go ahead and interpret the Quran yourself. I leave you behind Ahlul Bayt with the Quran, because they are the walking interpretations of the Quran. And this is something that's very important for us to realize. You know, in Surah Al-Imran, there's a verse in which Allah says, He talks about the Quran and He says there's certain verses. He says there's muhkam and mutashabih. Muhkam means decisive verses, which is very clear for us to understand. And there's verses mutashabih, that means allegorical verses, in which you cannot understand the meaning just by reading the verse. You have to have deeper knowledge of the Quran. And in that same verse, Allah says, this knowledge is with Allah only and those who have the knowledge. Very clear. And now you want to find out who has the knowledge? Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam has showed us who has the knowledge of the Quran. And in this verse, Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And people started doubting them. You know, the reason we have to understand is sometimes we apply our own intellect to Islam, and we want it to be a certain way. But we have to realize that Allah Himself is someone who created our intellect. Our intellect can never understand what Allah wants. There's a verse in the Quran when they say, how can he be at 8 years old? And people still today doubt that how can someone, an Imam, become 8 years old? And I asked them, did you not read the Quran? What did the Quran say in the verse? It says, Ya Yahya, khud al-kitab bi quwwatihi. Oh, Yahya, take the knowledge, the book, and hold it firmly. Take the book and hold it firmly. Ataynahu, we gave him. Al-hikmah, we gave him the knowledge. We atayna al-hikmah sabiyan. We gave him the knowledge when he was just a child. And he's talking about Yahya, Prophet Yahya. Allah says in the Quran, we gave him knowledge when he was just a child. Then we have the verse that's, what does Nabi Isa say when he's a young child? That I have been given prophet at this age, as a young child. Now people doubt, how can an Imam be at 8 years old? We have the Quran telling us that Allah has given hikmah to Sabiyan, as a child. And to a child, a baby, a newborn baby, Nabi Isa alayhi salam. So sometimes when we apply our thought processes to the Quran and say, how can these things happen? We have to understand our process is limited. Look at the Quran, the answers are all there. And they apply these same parameters to the Imam of the time? Did we not know that Nabi knew at 950 years he started preaching? How can our Imam be this thing? Nabi Isa alayhi salam is still alive. And now we doubt how our Imam could be 1100 years old? SubhanAllah, we can't use our mind to understand the Quran. There's a reason Allah left behind the Quran and Ahlul Bayt together, for us to understand this. Now, once we understand the history behind this, we have to understand who Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam was. And what can we learn, most importantly, what can we learn from his life to apply today? He was the epitome of knowledge, justice, tawheed. Islamic sciences benefited from him until today, and they continue to benefit till the end of time from the debates that he had with the scholars and the hadith that he gave to the people. Now I ask you today, when we go on with this lecture, I want you to understand that I want you to leave with a different vision and a different sense of life. Because what I mean by this is that how we look at life determines the actions that we do and decisions that we make and the choices that we make. But someone's who used to wear glasses, they wear the wrong lens, what happens to their life? They see things blurry, right? Likewise, we must look at the world and our own life through the lens of the Ahlul Bayt, through a lens of the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. And this is how you will make the best decisions in your life. So I ask you today, of course the majlis is the most important thing. And the tears purify our hearts. But the most important thing that Ahlul Bayt want from us today is to leave this majlis changing ourselves, understanding the lessons they have given us and applying those lessons to our lives. And this is how you become of those who become the Shia of Ali Muhammad. Because to be a Shia is not something we can just say we're Shia, it's an honor. It's an honored position. Once a man came to the Imam and says, we are your Shia. He says, do not give yourself this honored position unless you do what we say to do and stay away from what we say to stay away from. That's when you can call yourself a Shia. Because we are not just people who say we're Shia. We want to be those who act as Shia. As Shia is not something we can just give ourselves. It's earned. You want to be the Shia of Ali Muhammad, earn it in our lives. And to do this, we must leave this majlis today by applying the teachings we learned today and the teachings we're going to share from Ali Muhammad and from Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam in our lives, and walk away with the vision and changing our vision so we can apply the teachings to everyday life. And this is the best way we can honor Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam. This majlis is the first step in honoring him, but that honor, we honor him through every day of our life by following in his footsteps. There's a tradition which is narrated, salawat, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. There was a companion in the time of Rasulullah who wanted to always sit in the front because the barakah is in the front. But he would never make it to the front. Every time he tried to get to Masjid al-Nabawi, he never had a chance to sit in the first row. So one day he says, I'm going to do something. I'm not going to sleep tonight. I'm going to stay up all night to make it to Fajr to be in the first line. So he does this. He wakes up all night, doesn't sleep. He says, I'm going to be in the first line, to sit right in front of Rasulullah. And that night he walks from his house and he's taking steps towards the masjid, and he looks, because at that time you can see it's, if you've been to Medina or you've been to Karbala, you can see there's sand. And at that time many roads were not developed, so you can easily see footsteps that are happening. And as he sees, there's no footsteps, only one set, which is Rasulullah's footsteps. He says, SubhanAllah, I'm going to be the first one there. He gets to the masjid, and guess what? What do you think happens? There's someone there. There's someone sitting in the first row. He goes to this person, and it's narrated that person is Salman al-Farsi. As you know, one of the best companions. Now, the important thing is not to tell you that Salman al-Farsi was sitting there. The important thing is what I told you before. Do you remember what I said? There was only one set of footsteps. So he says, yes, Salman, either you fell from the sky or you slept here all night, because I've seen only one set of footprints. He says to be a Shia is to follow in the same footsteps as Rasulullah. He stepped in the same footsteps as Rasulullah. Literally stepped in the same footsteps as Rasulullah to the masjid. Because he knew if Rasulullah is doing something, it's the right thing to do. So for us to understand today what it means to be a Shia is to literally follow in their footsteps. Not make our own decisions of what we think is right and wrong, but right and wrong has been given to us by Ahl Muhammad. Follow in those footsteps. So as such, I want to narrate one hadith from Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam, which is very important hadith, and this is something I'll base the rest of the lecture on for us to understand. He says that for those who want, and it's narrated in Bihar al-Anwar, as you know, it's one of the collection of hadiths that we have. One of the biggest collection of hadiths that we have, he says that for someone who wants to be loved by the people or adored by the people, we have to do three things. The first one that the person has to do is to be fair in association. That means to be fair in how we treat people and how we see people. And I'll elaborate when I finish the hadith. And the second thing, he says that be there for people in their times of need and distress. That means be supportive when people are there in the ummah. And the last thing, have a content heart. Now going back to the first thing, he says, be fair in your association. See people in the same lens. What it means is to see people in the same lens. There's no higher or lower. Everyone is the same. Everyone is a creature of Allah. Allah, we made all of us. He didn't make one better than the other. He did not make me or you different in that sense. You know, we have a hadith, and you know how he learned these mannerisms. Of course, he's the Imam himself, but look who he grew up with. He grew up with Imam Ali Rida alayhi salam. And we have an example from his own life. The Imam Ali Rida alayhi salam, as you know, he was given heir apparent. That means he was given the honors of the Abbasid Caliphate. Even though they wanted to kill him, they gave him that honor just because they want to show the people, we love Ali Muhammad, be with us, give us money, support us. They had a farce. But at that time, they used to give the Imams certain privileges. The Imams never took them. They showed Ali Muhammad and privilege never goes together. You know, one day Imam Ali Rida alayhi salam, he was walking, he wanted to take a bath. They gave him the honor, because I do this because to understand they're doing a fake farce in front of the community. To give them servants to do baths for them so they don't have to take their own baths. Imam Ali Rida alayhi salam never took this. He used to go to the public bath, bathe with the servants, same thing, no difference. As he was going to the public bath, someone came to him, a soldier from Bani Abbas came to him. He did not recognize he's the Imam or who he was at center. He says that, move, come here, wash my head, shoulders. What do you think the Imam did? I want to ask you guys, what do you think the Imam did at that time? Complied, exactly. The Imam went quietly, did not say who he was, what he is, went and starts giving this guy a bath from his head, his shoulders. And the bathhouse keeper, who was away, he came and he saw this and he started yelling at the person, how dare you use the son of the daughter of Rasulullah to serve you in this way? Do you know who he is? He's Al-Rida, the grandson of Rasulullah. The soldier now starts panicking. He starts saying, oh my God, what did I do? I used the son of Rasulullah. He starts asking for forgiveness. Imam Rida alayhi salam did not punish him, did not say anything. He says that, you know, this was a good deed for me to serve you. Do you understand? He was the Imam of the time, the grandson of Rasulullah, but he did not differentiate between people. Whether that person was a soldier or a servant, he treated them the same. You know, in fact, it's not that he avoided dining with kings, and he dined with the servants. He used to sit in the same table as the servants, eat with them, shared food with them. The table he would not sit at is the table of the kings. In today's time, what do we do? And what do the people do? Oh, this person's coming, he's this important. We're going to sit with him, just every chance to sit with them. Ignoring, and while we treat the people with less status than us, or in those communities that have status situations, or people who have servants, how do we treat them? It's something for us to realize. You want to follow in the footsteps of Ali Muhammad? You want to call yourself Shia? Apply these in everyday life. These are not just sayings for us to hear once in a while in a majlis and say, wow, and understand. And no, it's for us to apply in everyday life. Because this is how you'll obtain the rahmah of Allah, and the highest station of being the Shia of Ali Muhammad. To do this. This is how we'll truly change ourselves. Now, to understand that, the second aspect is that before I go to that, I want you to understand that fairness and association also applies to people and races and everything. Understand? Do you know who the mother of Imam al-Jawad was? The mother of Imam al-Jawad was a servant who came from North Africa. At that time, the Arabs could not imagine marrying from North Africa or outside their own race. He married someone from North Africa. The Imam wanted to show that there is no difference as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. As he said, there's no difference between Arab and non-Arab, white or black, except taqwa and piety. The Imams wanted to show this. And if you look at most of the Imams who they married, you will see they were women from different races. In fact, you know that his own mother, his Imam Rida alayhi salam, did the same thing from North Africa. And for many people who don't know, since many of the community here is Pakistani, Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Do you know where one of his wives was from? From Sindh. Sindh in modern day Pakistan. She was from Sindh. The mother of Zayd al-Shahid alayhi salam. She was from Sindh. So the Imams married outside their culture. They married outside to show the people that there's no difference between Arab and non-Arab. There's no difference at all. Only difference is piety and taqwa. These are lessons we learn from the Imams. And they wanted to end this culture at that time because today in the world, at that time, slavery was there. They wanted to show the Imams, the Imams wanted to show that there's no difference between a slave and a free human. They're both creations of Allah. This is why they married from Africa as well, to show this to the people. To understand where all of us are the creations of Allah. Now and his mother, her name was either Khayzran or in the other tradition is Sabika. She was one of the most honored women at that time. She came as a slave from Africa, but she was one of the most honored women at the time in Arab societies because of her own actions and piety. He wanted to show this to the people. Now, going to the next part of the hadith that I mentioned before, he says that now we understand fairness and association, and second thing is now being there for people in their time of need. And the Imams themselves were the number one in this. They were there for the people no matter what. In fact, today we even have a letter from Imam Sahib Asr wa Zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sharif. That he says that, oh Shia, if you do not know that, if you do not understand that we're here for you and what we're doing for you, all the calamities would have taken you if you don't understand we were not there for you. The Imam today tells you this. He is here for you today. Remember that. And going back now to understand this hadith, we look back at the life of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And all the Imams, but I want to share this very special story from Imam Ali alayhi salam because it's very close to my heart. One day, Imam Ali alayhi salam was walking, he see the woman carrying a big jug of water. And as she was carrying his big jug of water, Imam Ali alayhi salam, offered to help her and bring it to the house. And he sees young children staring at the door and at the opening of the house, and he sees that, was there no one else here to help you? You know what she says to him? My husband and this children's father, he went to war with Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he was martyred. And she says, curse be on Ali. She's telling Imam Ali alayhi salam, curse be. She does not know who he is. He says, why? And she tells him, he was martyred in this one of the battles that they had. So Imam Ali alayhi salam, he understood this. He went home that night, and all Imam Ali alayhi salam could think about, and the narration tells us, is about those children. The next morning, he gathered bread, meat, water, went to the house first thing. And yet, he still did not tell them who he was. He did not say Imam Ali. Remember, Imam Ali at that time, he was the Khalifa, actual Khalifa. He goes to the woman's house, he breaks the bread, he starts making the bread with his own hands, sitting in front of the oven. And every time he felt the heat of the fire, he used to say, Ya Ali, this fire is the punishment of the ones who ignore the orphans and ignore the ummah. And then he kept doing this. And he would go to the children and he says that, take this bread and forgive Ali. Because he still didn't tell them who Imam Ali Islam was. And then he himself was the Khalifa at that time. Because they believed that Imam Ali Islam had wronged them. So he says, take this bread and forgive Ali. While a woman comes from a neighborhood and she says that, what are you doing? This is Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Caliph of the time. Do you know who's in your house serving you? Serving your children, making your bread in your house right now? He's the Khalifa of the time. This is how much they used to care for the people. This woman, as she asked for forgiveness, begged for forgiveness, and then she realized that her husband did not die in vain. He died serving this individual who served Allah, who had nothing but piety and nothing but compassion for the people. You know, that woman herself realized that this is who Ali was. This is who Ali. So this is what the Imams teach us of compassion. Today in this time, this age, help those around us. You may be better off living in this country than those in the world that need our help. Help them. Do the best we can. You want to follow in the footsteps of Ali, alayhi salam, and Ali Muhammad. You want to do that? Help the people. This is the best thing that we can do. Be compassionate in their time. Understand that many people, even our own community, might be going through issues. Be there for them. Compassion, mercy, ethics, akhlaq, these are the foundations of Islam. And this is what Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, his name was also al-Taqi, one of the honors that was given to him. That means the most pious. He was the most pious amongst the people and the most generous amongst the people. This is what he used to teach the people. Be there for our community. Today we are brothers and sisters in faith. And you know the famous saying we have from Imam Ali alayhi salam, from Nahj al-Balagha, and in his letter to Malik al-Ashtar, he says that people are either your brothers in faith or equal in humanity. He goes on. Many people don't go on the rest of the letter and understand what he said after that. After he says people are either your brother in faith or equal in humanity, he says that, oh Malik, treat people how you want to be treated. And forgive people how you want Allah to forgive you. Remember this. These are the most important teachings we have to understand. Have compassion for the people. Be there. This is how you will help make not only our community better, but the outside community. This is how you'll bring people to Islam and make the world better in general. Follow the teachings of Imam and the Anbiya, and this is how we can make a change in our lives and the community itself. And have compassion for the people. And now, the last part of the hadith that I mentioned was to have a content heart and a spiritual heart. You know, Allah says in the Holy Quran that verily only in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. This is something that's very important today for us to understand, especially for the younger generations today. Because today, and before I go on to the rest of this lecture, I want to share a survey that was done by the people, in which I read the other day. Pew Research survey shows that 23% of people, of Muslims, young Muslims, are leaving their faith. In America, 23%. Given most of them are the Iranians who came from Iran during the revolution, but still it is a very big amount. More to that survey, it shows that more than 60% are millennials. That means people who were born after 1980 of the American Muslims today. It's for us to understand today. And only less than 30% of those who are born before 1954 or before, right? So to put this into context, more than around 70% of the Muslims in America are youth, less than the age of 39. And this is very important for us to understand. And the reason I mention this before I go to the rest of the lecture is to put everything into context. Because this lecture today is to help us to understand our responsibility to the youth. Because Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, what was he? He died in his youth. He was an Imam in his youth. And for us to understand this survey, and the last part and the most important part of that survey was that it showed amongst the American Muslims today, they were asked this question: how much does this X value in what it means to being a Muslim? 85% said that Tawheed, believing in Allah's oneness, meant that's what it means to be a Muslim. Only 85%. The Imams died on Tawheed to show the oneness of Allah. And today, 85% of Muslims are saying that that's important in Islam. What happened to the 15%? 72% said it's important to love the family of Muhammad and the Prophet. 72%. The family of Muhammad died, was martyred, son after son, child after child, to give their servants to Islam. But 72%, and Allah and Rasulullah in the Quran, it's embodied, mawadda fil qurba, to love my family. It's all I ask you. Only 72% says it's important to love the Prophet and his family. And we go down that line of those questions, only 50% believe in eating halal is important to being a Muslim. 50% believe that following the Quran and Sunnah is important to being a Muslim. And the reason I bring up these statistics is that this is what it's here for. It's for us to realize the problems and how to fix them, and talk about how we can fix them as a community. And to bring these problems up. Because this is how you honor the Ahlul Bayt. To remember, if we ignore the youth today and ignore these situations and to only talk about the hadith and not how to apply the hadith, we have done an injustice to Ali Muhammad and the hadith that we have brought to us. Remember this. So while this percentage of our generation here today, we're in America, is being lost, and we have to understand why it's being done. Today, they're being distracted like no one else by social media. Social media is showing them that this magical life that people are living is what we have to attain. These materialistic things we have to attain. This is how we become happy. It's showing them happiness equates to cars, big houses, vacations. This is what social media today is showing the kids today. And that Islam itself is nothing but rituals. They have lost the purity of Islam. You know, Islam is not rituals and actions. Islam comes from one's heart. It's a constant act of submitting to Allah and following the path of Ali Muhammad. This is what Islam is. Not just actions and rituals. It's following this in everyday life. But today the young youth today are not experiencing this. They're seeing the topics they want to talk about are not being talked about. They're seeing that they have no one they can turn to in our society, in our communities. They're being pushed away. And I give this as an important reminder to the people today that while about 80% is youth in America, this is the future generation right now. And if we don't help them and turn towards them and their needs and look towards their needs, these masjids today, alhamdulillah, it's full, but tomorrow it's going to be empty. And this has happened before. The Jewish community has come here a long time before the Muslim community. At first, they realized that half of the Jewish people lost their faith. As you see today, many of you people, if you've been to New York or even the Jewish communities in New Jersey, you see they're very close to their faith today. The Christians, as you can see, many of the masjids today, what did they come from? Former churches. Why? Why is the church being sold? Do you understand that? People have lost their faith. Even the Christians, they follow a certain faith. They lost their faith. The youth didn't follow that anymore. The Jewish people realized this over generations because they came early in the 1800s and 1700s. And they lost their faith. Their youth did not come. Their synagogues being empty. And they realized this and they changed. And they put an emphasis on community and youth, not individualism. Society today teaches us individualism. Me, myself, my house, my money, my car. Not focusing on community. Building the community is the most important thing for us. And especially today in the time of Sahab Asr wa Zaman, the importance of building a community is very important because today our job is not to just wait for the Imam to come one day. When we say Labayk Ya Hussein, what does that mean? Does anyone know what Labayk Ya Hussein means and why the reason we say it? Labayk Ya Hussein is not a cry. It's an answer to the call Imam Hussein alayhi salam made on the day of Ashura. Is there anyone there to help me? It's an active call. I think, yeah, Hussein, I'm here for you. But today, what does that mean? We couldn't have been there in Ashura. What does it mean today? It means I am here for the Imam of our time today. That's what Labayk Ya Hussein means today when we cry this. It's not a chant. It's the answer to the call. It's a call to service. into action for us to build that community together. And that community, as we know, is majority youth today. So as we learn these majalis, I urge everyone in every community, whether here or anywhere else, and I see a good amount of youth here today, but we hope to see the communities full of youth, to focus on them, to focus on situations that they're going through, and help them be part of this community. So today, this masjid today can be just like this in about 50 years, or 20 years. Not even 20 years, about 10 years. Now, that being said, I want to talk about how the youth can learn from Imam Jawad alayhi salam. He himself teaches us that in your youth and in your age, we say that there's no one who can become like the Imams. We can never compare ourselves to the Imams ever. But we must see what is the distance between us and with their teachings and measure that. In his youth, he showed us what a youth can do and what they're capable of. Now, we may never become the Imam, but learn from the things he did in his youth and his teachings to apply to our lives, to make our lives better, especially the youth today. In America, more than 70% of the youth today, some of them are depressed. And the point here is not to talk about the statistics of depression, but there's another survey done that showed us that out of those 70%, the majority are depressed. Why? Because they attach their happiness to the materialistic things. But another survey shows us that those youth and those people who attach their happiness to non-materialistic things such as faith were those who were not depressed, who had the last chances of depression. So the youth listening today, remember this. Happiness does not come from these cars, houses, fancy vacations. Happiness comes from remembrance of Allah, as Allah has said, to following the footsteps of the Ahlul Bayt and applying these teachings to our lives, because we're not, Imam alayhi Islam has a very beautiful teaching. He says that do not sell your soul for the world, because the price for your soul is nothing less than Jannah in the heavens. Remember this. Remember this today. You're meant more than this life here today. Your soul is meant for Jannah. Keeping that in mind, understand how you want to go about and live your life today. Imam alayhi Islam has put people into 3 categories. And pay very important attention to this. 3 categories. He says the first category is that those ulama rabbani, that means those divinely scholars. Category 2, muta'allam ala sabil al-najat, that means those people who take on the path of knowledge. And the last, he says hamaj al-ra'a, which is insects that go with the wind wherever the wind takes them. Now I want everyone to think about this saying today. You can be either of 3 things in your life. Either you are a divinely scholar, or someone who's taken up the path of scholarship. Number 2, a student on the path of knowledge, and that student does not mean you have to become an alim, but someone who is openly seeking knowledge to understand. Because why? Because knowledge will help you understand your place in this world, who you are, your worth. Most importantly, your worth. Not that you're someone who can just go with the crowds, wherever the crowd takes us today, whatever is the latest trend, we're just going to go with them. This is not the point. You cannot just be a sheep following the herd. Imam alayhi salam also says inside us is Alim al-Akbar. He teaches us the universe, the greater universe is inside you. Know your worth, know your status in Allah's eyes. Do not sell yourself for this world. Follow these teachings. Seek knowledge. Become better. Follow the teachings of Ali Muhammad. Follow the teachings of Imam Jawad alayhi salam that you learned today. And make your life better in that path. You're not someone who can just go with the winds. Because people who just go with the winds are a state of ghafla. In a state just not knowing what my life's going to take me today. Whatever this new fad is coming out. Whatever this new thing is. Let me do this. Let me do that. Where's our honor? You have to have honor for your intellect, for yourself. Allah has given us intellect to remember this. Know your worth. Remember this. And I urge all of you to understand this today. Learn. Because you can either be of these 3 categories. And I'm sure you do not want to be insects that go with the wind. That's not how you want to clarify yourself as. Remember that. So it's important to learn. And that being said, the last part of hadith was understanding the importance of the heart and the spiritual states. And the way to fix this is to get close to the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, to remember Allah often, to remember the Quran, be one with the Quran. And this is how you'll become better in your hearts. One day there's a story narrated of Nabi Isa alayhi salam. He was walking, and people started cursing him. And his companion says that, why are you treating them with kindness while all they do is curse you? He says, a man can give from only what's inside his heart. Remember that. You can only emulate and portray and give out and radiate what's inside your heart. So fix our heart itself. Take out jealousy. Take out hatred. Remember, our hearts are a home for Allah. Our hearts have the love of Ali Muhammad. Our hearts have the walayat of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali alayhi salam. How can we keep hatred, jealousy, everything like this inside our heart that has the heart that holds the love of Amir al-Mu'mineen, that holds the love of Ali Muhammad, that holds the love of God, Allah? They don't go together. You want to follow the path of Ali Muhammad? Remember this. And this is how we can become better. Now, Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, he, at the age of 25, he was martyred. At the young age of only 25. Now, before we talk about his martyrdom, we have to realize what happened. Why did they martyr him? They martyred him because they seen when they allowed him to speak to the people realized that this is the true vicegerent on earth of God. Not these caliphs that were taking up power. People started realizing that these were the ones, Ali Muhammad, the ones promised by Rasulullah, are the ones we have to follow. The Abbasids and everyone in the Khalifa started realizing that if we allow them to speak, just by the beauty of their words, people will run towards them and take down our Caliphate. And this is why they started putting them in house arrest. And this is why Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam, at the age of 25 or 24 in some narrations, was martyred. Remember this. Now, I ask you before we go into the Messiah to realize this, to remember what I said, to take from these teachings and apply it to our lives, and honor him, honor him today by applying these teachings to your lives every single day. And sharing with the people who were these Ali Muhammad, the ones who gave up their lives for the sake of this religion of Islam. Remember that. Now, as we remember him, I want to take all of us to take our hearts to Qadmain. If anyone been to Qadmain before, you realize that there's two domes. He was buried in Qadmain. In Qadmain, the first one buried there was Imam Musa al-Qadim alayhi salam. Baghdad was no stranger to the martyrdom of Ali Muhammad. Baghdad was no stranger. It's seen Imam Musa al-Qadim alayhi salam, those who realized his life and how he was martyred, he was left on the bridge for 3 days. Ali Muhammad, the grandson of Rasulullah, Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, was left on the bridge for 3 days, Ya Shia. Ya Ummah, what have we done to the family of Rasulullah? He was left on the bridge for 3 days. We send him our salams. Assalamu alayka ya Musa al-Qadim alayhi salam. In the same place, Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam, he was buried. It says that, one narration says that he was poisoned through one of the viziers of al-Mu'tasim al-Abbasi. The second narration says that his own wife poisoned him. It says that day, Kana Imam Sa'iman, he was fasting that day. He went home that day to eat some food, break his fast. The Imam himself, it says that he ate the poison, and the poison that he ate, it says that he started moving between north and south, left and right. The poison started eating up his intestines, and it sucked up all the water of his body. Ya Jawada, Ya Imama. The Imam was crying out for water. He says, can I have some water, please? Ya Jawada, Ya Atshana, the one who is thirsty, the one who needs water. And as he remembered the water, he remembered his grandfather Hussein. He remembered his grandfather Hussein, who laid in the plains of Karbala thirsty. Ali Muhammad are no strangers to thirst. For Ali Muhammad seen poison and thirst throughout Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Since then, they've been seeing this martyrdom. Now, he was no stranger to that. You have to remember who he is. In his last breath, he's crying out, he's screaming for water. He's remembering Ali Muhammad. He's just remembering Allah. This is giving him, solace in these times of need, in these times when he's struggling. It says that he struggled so much, he started walking, his body started shaking from this poison. This poison started eating his intestines, and it started eating his body from the insides. He was martyred alone, only with his children. This was our Ali Muhammad. Remember who we're talking about here today. These are the same grandchildren, the one that Rasulullah used to carry on his back in the city of Medina. Now, when we send our salams to Rasulullah, we also send our salams to Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, who's seen all of her grandchildren one by one being martyred. Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, the same mother who has no one to cry at her grave today. While we cry at her grandchildren today, there's no one there in the lonely grave of Medina today. We have to remember this as we cry for Ali Muhammad. And the same Fatima al-Zahra, when she was there crying for her grandchildren today, the same Fatima al-Zahra who narration says she visits us here today to show her today that the tears that you cry for Ali Muhammad show Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra how important her grandchildren were for you today. In this we realize Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam, he was martyred, buried alone with his grandfather in the city of Baghdad. Inna Allah wa inna Allahi raji'un. I ask Allah to grant us the intercession of Al-Jawad and Ali Muhammad and Rasulullah. I ask Allah to keep us steadfast and loyal in the Wilayat Amir al-Mu'mineen. I ask Allah to make us the companions of Imam Sahib Asr wa Zaman today. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I ask Allah to heal Al-Shafi, to heal all those who need healing today. I ask Allah to give forgiveness and rahmah, Al-Rahman, to our parents and all those who need rahmah today in our lives today. And I ask us today, ask Allah to keep us steadfast in the path of Imam Sahib al-Zaman and for us to build that community. Matam al-Hussein.
Hussein, 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 पे वो ज़ैनब की रिदा तक तरहा हाय नेज़े पे वो ज़ैनब की रिदा तक तरहा हाय नेज़े पे वो ज़ैनब की रिदा तक तरहा हाय नेज़े वो ज़ैनब की रिदा तक तरहा हाय नेज़े पे वो ज़ैनब की रिदा तक तरहा हाय नेज़े पे वो ज़ैनब की रिदा तक तरहा हाय नेज़े पे वो ज़ैनब की रिदा तक तरहा हाय नेज़े ज़ैनब की रिदा तक तरहा شام آ کے بھی وہ ہر پل کربلا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، خون روتا ہی رہا عابد مگر چاروں طرف، خون روتا ہی رہا عابد مگر چاروں طرف، وہ سکینہ تیرے کانوں کی دوا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، بھیرتی چاروں طرف اوئے واہ جابا کی صدا، بھیرتی چاروں طرف اوئے واہ جابا کی صدا، پتھروں کی بارشوں میں راستہ تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، جب خبر آئی سکینہ یہ کہاں چھوڑ گئی، جب خبر آئی سکینہ یہ کہاں چھوڑ گئی، سن کے عابد مر گیا پھر کھڑا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، آج عابد سوچتا ہے زیر خنجر دو بدو، آج عابد سوچتا ہے زیر خنجر دو بدو، کربلا میں کبریا کو کبریا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، خون روتا ہی رہا عابد مگر چاروں طرف، خون روتا ہی رہا عابد مگر چاروں طرف، وہ سکینہ تیرے کانوں کی دوا تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک تارہا، ہائے تک تارہا، ہائے نیزے پہ وہ زینب کی ردا تک، شام آ کے بھی وہ ہر پل کربلا تک تارہا، حسین یا 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 حسین جھولے سے بے زباں کو شبیر نے اٹھایا 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 جھولے سے بے زباں جھولے سے بے زباں کو شبیر نے اٹھایا سہلوگے تیر کیا تم سہلوگے تیر کیا تم پیاسے گلے پہ اصغر جھولے سے بے زباں کو شبیر نے اٹھایا جھولے بے زباں کو شبیر نے اٹھایا دریا سے گھونٹ پانی نہ پلا سکے مسلمان دریا سے گھونٹ پانی نہ پلا سکے مسلمان اصغر کی تشنگی کو اصغر کی تشنگی کو ہے تیر نے بجھایا جھولے سے بے زباں کو شبیر نے اٹھایا جھولے جھولے سے بے زباں کو اصغر کی لاش ڈھونڈی افسوس برچیوں نے اصغر کی لاش ڈھونڈی افسوس برچیوں نے تن سے جدا کیا سر تن سے جدا کیا سر پھر سانگ پر چرایا جھولے سے بے زباں کو شبیر نے اٹھایا میں آنسوؤں کا پانی اصغر پہ لاؤں تجھ کو میں آنسوؤں کا پانی اصغر پہ لاؤں تجھ کو میدان سے لوٹے اب میدان سے لوٹے اب وقت سحر آیا جھولے سے بے زباں کو شبیر نے اٹھایا بوسے دیے گلے پر بوسے دیے گلے پر سینے سے پھر لگایا جھولے سے
لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا يصلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. لبیک اللہم لبیک اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. سبحان اللہ والحمد للہ ولا الہ الا اللہ واللہ اکبر. الہا واحدا احدا فردا صمدا لم يتخذ صاحبۃ ولا ولدا ولم یکن لہ شریک فی الملک ولم یکن لہ علی من الذل وکبرہ تکبیرا. اللہ اکبر. اللہ اکبر جل جلالہ جل شانہ. اللہ اکبر. اللہ اکبر جل جلالہ جل شانہ. اشہد ان لا الہ الا اللہ. اشہد ان لا الہ الا اللہ. اشہد ان محمد رسول اللہ. اشہد ان محمد رسول اللہ. اشہد ان امیر المؤمنین و امام المتقین علی ولی اللہ و وصی رسول اللہ و خلیفتہ بلا فصل. اشہد ان امیر المؤمنین و امام المتقین علی حجت اللہ. حی علی الصلاۃ. حی علی الصلاۃ. حی علی الفلاح. حی علی الفلاح. حی علی خیر العمل. حی علی خیر العمل. اللہ اکبر. اللہ اکبر. لا الہ الا اللہ. لا الہ الا اللہ. اللہم اجعل قلبی باروں وعملی سواروں وعرشی قاروں ورزقی داروں واولادی ابرارا واجعل لی عند خبر نبیک محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ مستقرا وقرارا برحمتک یا ارحم الراحمین.